Hi everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 244 of Album of the Day, which, it's been a couple of weeks since I last did an album review because I've been starting my freshman year of college at Anne Arundel Community College, so I've been busy. I've been pretty busy lately, sort of getting used to the workload and all that, so that's why I haven't really had the time to do an album review in a while, but now I'm back and I'm ready to review another album. Which for today's artist, this is a New York-based folk rock and indie outfit that have been around since the mid-2000s, and this is a band probably most people have heard about through Conor Oberst, who, of course, at the time this band first came up, was the frontman for the band Bright Eyes, and their majority of their albums during the 2000s were released on Oberst's Team Love label. Of course, I'm talking about the band known as the Felice Brothers, and now they are currently signed with Yep Rock after years on Team Love and probably some other label. This is their second full-length album from Yep Rock, released on May 3rd, 2019, and the album is called Undress. And as you can see, since I'm a completist of Yep Rock albums, I have the vinyl right here as well as the CD. And this is one I've been wanting to review for a while because this is definitely in my top 10 so far of 2019. First time in a long time that Yep Rock has really sort of made it into my top 10, because this is such an amazing album, and definitely an improvement on their politically charged folk rock. I'll go in a little more detail about this later in the review. First, got to show you the album cover. In the back, there's 12 songs on this album, and it's over 48 minutes in length. And really beautiful paintings, which are done by Ian Felice, the band's frontman. So the brothers are Ian Felice, along with James Felice, who sings and plays keyboards and accordion. There's another brother, Simone Felice, who used to play drums for him, but he left the band at some point. And no lyrics on this. Just the liner notes. Written and recorded throughout 2018. And there's a really cool vinyl color this is on. Yeah, there's side A. And then there's side B. And I like how there's one side that's red and another side that's yellow on this vinyl. Yeah, that's the packaging for my vinyl copy of Undress, the new album by the Felice Brothers. Now, the band did release another album on Yep Rock in 2016. That album is called Life in the Dark. And as you remember from my initial review of the album, I did really like it. But as time went on, I sort of found myself, cooling down on it pretty significantly, to the point where I just kind of found some pretty glaring flaws about that album, including that the lyrics weren't that cohesive, although they aimed to tell an interesting story. Also, the mixing on the album was a bit wonky. There were a couple of highlights on there, but it was the kind of thing that felt maybe a little too So it felt a little too much like drunken folk rock to me. Uh, So it definitely wasn't my favorite album of theirs. But the teaser tracks for this new album, I think, have been piquing my interest a little more. And I will say, upon hearing the record, I'm very happy that the band made all the improvements that I wanted to hear from them from their last album. This definitely is an improvement on their politically charged folk rock on all fronts. The better songwriting, the production is definitely miles better too. It definitely feels very organic, but at the same time, feels a little more cleaned up too. The harmonies are great on this thing. Ian Felice's vocal performances are very entertaining and suit some of the satire and all this stuff in his stories really well. There are plenty of songs, even the most politically charged ones, that use satire incredibly well, like the track Special Announcement, which seems to be about a guy who's saving up all his money to be president, and although he's not really a true expert on politics, he knows that he would be a much nicer person, and he would do better things for the people, and promise more berries on Blueberry Hill. And Berry Hill, sort of promising this country that he'd be a better president than the one we already have, obviously, which is obviously Donald Trump. And the song also has a very catchy chorus and great harmonies on it, and there's some pretty satisfying quotables in the lyrics too, like, they want to lick their enemies' hearts and brains and lick the bloody plates. Like, I just can't help but smile when Ian Felice is shouting that. The track Holy Weight Champ is also another one that is kind of a satirical assessment on how our country is kind of essentially personified as this holy weight champ that holds a bunch of very expensive things like Tupperware, weapons of self-defense, which would be stuff like guns and stuff like that, and as well as electronic devices that distract people from doing actual speaking to other people. And this guy that narrates the song sort of talks about how he doesn't really need all that stuff to have a complete life that he wants. So, and also there's a very interesting spoken word passage in the song that's kind of symbolically describing sort of sailing away, expecting to find some sort of paradise, but all you see are all these radios on the beach, and it's essentially a roller coaster ride into the slums. The track Salvation Army Girl is definitely one that... So, the track Salvation Army Girl sort of describes this woman who is like very pretty, and she is someone that the people think is very important to them, even though she's just kind of the random woman dropping breadcrumbs into the ocean for the pigeons in Washington Square. But it definitely is some really clever satire, because there's a little bit of sarcasm going on in the track that I really like. And the harmonies on it are fantastic. The doo-wop harmonies on the chorus especially are incredible. Fantastic horns, great piano. No, it's a very fun song, I would say. Now, the title Undress is also the title of the opening cut on here, which is a song that uses undress as kind of like this mantra to describe our country's sort of unraveling. So it's not so much about removing clothes and becoming nude, but more about sort of our country kind of undressing on all the terrible things that we may have feared on the night of the election, of the 2016 election, and stuff like that. And it's just a great way to open the album because it's just downright a lot of fun, and the ending chorus of the track definitely feels very cathartic. And even though even though the subject matter of the song isn't very positive, you can't help but just sing along and kind of feel very happy while listening to it. Like me, for example, has that sort of feeling. The track TV Mama, which is a very beautiful country ballad, and sort of very beautiful country ballad that's punctuated with some very nice pedal steel playing and playing great bass line and drumming too, is sort of about how TV shows and stuff like that have kind of been sort of changing people's idea of what love or a relationship will be like, but in reality it ends up not being quite as sweet or as satisfying as TV may have made it seem. But this is also a song that seems to be narrated by a guy who feels really lonely, and the only thing that sort of lets him kind of want to go on with his life is some of the romantic TV he watches. And I like how Ian Felice sort of describes this concept metaphorically, but then in the second verse he sort of gives listeners kind of a clue as to what he meant by the opening verse about driving around a volcano. The Kid is a song that's sort of about gun violence and how mentally unhealthy high school students or college students have definitely been one of the few people that have been possessed by mental illness to shoot and kill a bunch of innocent people in a school, for example. And this is example, but it also feels like a fun song to sing while drunk. And I like how it's sort of symbolically about how mentally ill teenagers sort of would do such a thing. With lyrics in the chorus of like, heaven knows the kid and the things that he did were wrong, but who is to blame? And this is a song that I actually do really relate to on this album because it's really broke my heart, like every time, to hear about some sort of high school or college shooting, whether it be the Parkland, Florida school shooting from last year was, one thing that was very heartbreaking to me, that, these teenagers who don't get help for any of their mental health or problems, they just think that the only way for them to, feel better is to, hurt and abruptly cut short the lives of other people. But not only is this album about, some of these political things, but it also does deal with Ian Felice's personal life and what's been going on with him since the last record, which has been a lot of changes. Even though some of these things actually did happen before the last record, or maybe not. For example, the death of his father is definitely one thing that permeates this album quite a bit on tracks like Jack Reminiscing, which, even though it does sound very upbeat and very honky-tonk like, it sort of delves into some things that about his father that really were very important to him and that made him feel like a very complete and loved person. um, the persons. And yeah, so it becomes a little heartbreaking to hear the line of, and the holy man said someday we'll meet again. Again, this is a good song, although I will say my only critique of it being that, it doesn't really seem to fit in as much with some of the other lyrical topics of the album. Though the track Poor Blind Birds, which is my favorite track here, most certainly does. But it also is a song that sort of can be the meaning of we live in a world we don't understand, can not only be applied to kind of our Trump-led America, but also personal life too. So the song seems to be dealing with his father passing away and confronting it more sort of explicitly than ever before. For my favorite verse on the track would have to be my favorite lyrics on this song, and probably on this entire album, would have to be the lines of "I've seen you twice on a glass of red brandy on ice, as the sky filled with golden spears and hung a wreath in the house of grief." That's poeticism right there, Ian. Ian, and describing the promised land as kind of a house of grief actually kind of makes the situation a little more heartbreaking. And it's also a song about feeling lonely and trying to find your own path in the world. The song Days of the Years is another one that, though it does kind of feel a little bit like a stream of consciousness of different situations Ian is in, it definitely all comes down to he's a changed man, and he's not only not only is the lineup of the band changing. For example, they got a new drummer and a new bass player, and their fiddle player Greg Farley left the band too. And also Ian has become a father too. This is definitely a very compelling journey into his own life state right now. And the closing track, Socrates, is a song that's inspired by a poem written by Jack Spicer about this man who wrote some poetry and stories, but even in an area where he was accused of writing all that, so he ends up being put on death row, and he has, it is sort of about how he has 24 hours until his death. But then applying it to this character who is being accused of writing songs and has only 24 hours left to go until they tie him to a stake and, of course, burn him. But it definitely fits in perfectly with some of the themes of the album of how people still feel very betrayed by society, like LGBTQ members get fired from their LGBTQ members. Some of them get fired because of their sexual orientation, for example. And also another example of betrayal is that women end up accusing men for doing them wrong and putting them through the hell of sexual misconduct. It's like all these things that are very complicated that are kind of reasons why some people feel a little betrayed in society. So it's definitely a very heart-wrenching way to end the record, even though it feels like a very explosive, cinematic way to end the album. And it does have some very beautiful instrumentation, like really nice French horns, mournful pianos, great guitar playing. Also, great closer for the album. And the last songs that I'd like to highlight here on this album are the James Felice compositions, although There's one of them that I think is really good, and the other that's kind of more okay. The track Nail It on the First Try. Beautiful song, I will say. Beautiful piano playing and accordion on there. But because it kind of goes through these three different phases in just over 2 minutes, structurally, it's definitely not the best song on the album, and it feels kind of like, and it feels very half-baked. It's essentially three really good ideas, just kind of sort of lazily, plopped onto each other. But the track Hometown Hero is definitely turned into one of my favorite tracks here. It's the song about how in this kind of messed up America, it definitely, the feeling of when our hometown heroes come back home, it becomes an even more of a necessary feeling for all of us. I definitely do really like this much needed pick me up in the middle of kind of a sort of morbid album if you really think about all of these situations. Love the battlefield banjos and percussion going on in the track too. To the spooky vocal harmonies, it definitely is another example of the band kind of pushing themselves sonically. Yeah, really dug this album. I went on a pretty lengthy deep dive with this album. It's literally that good. And out of all the politically charged albums I've listened to in 2019, this is probably the one that resonated with me the most. Although there are a couple other records that have similar topics going on that I do recommend. For example, you may remember I really loved Quelly Chris's new album, Guns, and kind of its deep dive into the culture of firearms and how they've affected society in some pretty negative ways. This album is definitely my favorite political record of the year so far. I mean, you ready for the score? You ready for the score? Yes. I'm feeling a light 9 on this thing. Yes, I gave it a 9 out of 10. I didn't expect I'd rank it that high, but, the Felice Brothers really nailed it on this one, and I'm really excited for where they approach their music in the future. So that's my review of the new Felice Brothers record, Undress, and I'll see you for episode 245.